We built a unique and proprietary EVP framework across 5 different categories. And then within each of those categories, across them all, there's around 500 unique, specific sort of value propositions that we have collated and defined.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here.
Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host. So glad to be here with you and looking forward to a fun conversation today. You all know that one of my favorite things to do is talk about data and using that to create new insights, create new directions and strategies, all that good stuff. And so today that's going to be part of the conversation with David Wilkins from Talent Neuron. We're going to get into some of the things that they're doing to support companies, some of the new things that they're rolling out as well. And I'm so pumped to have a data nerd conversation with you, Dave. Welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm equally pumped for the data nerd conversation.
Before we get into some of the good stuff I was teasing there, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. On a personal level, Dave Wilkins, I am Chief Product and Marketing Officer for Talent Neuron. Been banging around the HCM space now for a little over 30 years in a variety of roles across many companies. Probably folks are familiar with Taleo, Oracle, Healthcare Source, way back in the day, learn.com, been in the space a bit. The company I'm with is Talent Neuron, as you mentioned. We're pretty much the world's leading provider of labor market analytics. So think about global sort of talent data. So things like talent supply, talent demand, cost for talent. And we cover enough countries, about 40 countries now. It represents about 90% of the world's GDP. And then what we do with that data, Ben, is we take really a real deep AI and machine learning investment that we've made to take all that unstructured data, make it structured to then support things like strategic workforce planning, skill analysis, looking at skill evolution across different industries and different markets. We look at things like location planning, like where should you situate a new plant of operations or a new center of excellence based on availability of talent and cost of talent. We can support things like DEI tactics to make sure you're hiring in places where there's high levels of diversity natively in the population that you're trying to operate in. And then even things like sourcing, like where if I have to choose between like Austin or Boston as a place to hire, which of those has a higher level of hiring difficulty or higher cost, and that might help inform my decisions. So it's really in that arena of strategic talent acquisition and strategic workforce planning, using labor market data as an additional tool in that process.
And again, that excites me on so many levels because more and more we're hearing from companies that are saying, it's not good enough for us to rely on data that are a year or two old. We're looking at things that are going to help us think about what's next and doing this more forward-looking planning, strategic workforce planning, all those pieces. And so more and more of the companies I'm talking to are leaning forward and trying to be proactive there. And so that's exciting to hear some of the use cases. So one of the things that the team reached out about that y'all are doing that's newer and a new evolution of what Talent Neuron's been known for a long time, which is using data to get answers to big problems, is around this EVP sentiment analysis piece of that. So would you take a minute and talk more about that piece and what kind of insights companies are drawing from that?
Yeah, sure. So what we did, I think, is pretty interesting in that we built a unique and proprietary EVP framework across 5 different categories. And then within each of those categories, across them all, there's around 500 unique, specific sort of value propositions that we have collated and defined. So at the category level, Ben, it's like your workplace and workplace model, people, total rewards, growth opportunities, and then like culture and values. So similar to probably other EVP frameworks. The thing that we're doing, though, that's really unique and interesting is then with that collection of individual attributes, what we do then is we take all the job posts we collect across 40 countries and 22 languages and about 1.5 million job posts a day. And then we scan those using AI and machine learning technologies to detect the presence of those EVPs. So what it enables us to do is at an individual job post and location level, we can see what you're posting for your EVPs versus what your competitors are doing and begin to map out on a position basis in a given location in the world how are you competing against your main talent competitors from an EVP standpoint? And so that I think a lot of EVP strategies start from the top down, and they start from what's my EVP writ large across the whole company. But then a lot of times it breaks down when you actually begin to see it manifest in the individual posts. So we're coming at it like the opposite way, like from the bottoms up. In the realm of like hand-to-hand combat in the trenches, you're looking for a data engineer in like London. Who else is looking for a data engineer in London, and how does their EVP compare to yours for that particular job in that particular city or that MSA? And that I think is really unique and powerful and gives a whole different perspective and a whole different lens through which you can see your EVP relative to competitors.
So much of the analysis on things like job posting data, all of those things has been focused around salary purely and nothing else. I can see who else is posting in this market. I can see the same job title and the pay rates, and I can compare and contrast and decide if or how much I'm going to change my pay rate to try to compete there. That's as far as most of the other companies have even thought about going. So I think that's really a fun look at that. I was talking to a chief people officer this morning about EVP, and we were talking about grassroots, looking at it from the bottom up versus top down. When companies are trying to figure this out, the best ones are saying, not just sitting in a corner office saying, this sounds like a good idea, let's put that on our EVP. But they're actually always, what matters to you? Why do you stay here? It's with you. And so taking that aggregate approach to that just seems like the smarter way to go to me, because you're getting this better picture of what the real truth is. And you may find out that, hey, this is what we think is important as a leadership team, but we're not presenting that properly. The way we're sharing that, even looking at your own data, you might be surprised at some of those kinds of things too, not just how the competition is presenting themselves, but you might be off the mark from what you thought you were doing.
Ben, that's such an insightful comment. That was actually one of the first things some of our very early adopters discovered was the EVP that they're putting out at the very high level for the org was not being well represented in the actual posts that were going out. And there was this misalignment, like in the way that they were communicating in a detailed level at the post level compared to what they were saying at the main level, right? And then the other thing that we're seeing now, right, is like we layered in sentiment analysis to all of this as well. So there's sort of two pieces. One is like the actual documentation of the EVP at the post level, but then we partnered with a company that gives us access to sentiment data. And so we bring in sentiment data about the same organization to then compare. You say in your EVP, work-life balance really matters, but what does the sentiment data say about what your people in the company say about work-life balance? So now we can actually connect the dots between the way companies present EVP, but the way then on the flip side, sentiment gets represented as well. And we can start to see, are there any patterns in companies that are outperforming their peer groups in terms of sentiment? Are there any differences or uniquenesses in their EVPs that might suggest that the way that they're thinking about EVP is a driver of differences in sentiment compared to peer groups, which is also fascinating.
So that data set would be probably employee reviews, things like that?
Yeah. So think like what the kind of stuff you get like in a Glassdoor, that kind of thing.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I figured I want to make sure that one was clear because, again, my mind's like turning, thinking of all the applications of that and how I would have used that when I was recruiting day to day all those years ago. I'm thinking like, man, it would have really helped me to know, as you were just saying a second ago, which one of these things is really clicking with people and which one are we saying, but everybody else is saying it, so no one cares.
Yes. Yeah. Two funny comments about that. So like the interesting thing, I think, is the range of things you can do with it, as you just were alluding to. So on the one hand, on a super tactical hand-to-hand combat level, some of our clients are doing things like during the offer process, often the candidate will reveal who else they're looking at, right? And who else they're considering offers from. If you can just immediately in our solution look up what's their value prop, what's their sentiment, you can, in that moment, in that conversation, actually juke and weave some of the way you're talking about your value prop and your positioning in a very nuanced way to better position your own offer, you better position your own culture against some of what in the EVP and sentiment data for the other companies they're considering. So we have some companies doing that in this very hand-to-hand combat way, right? But then like on the flip side, in a super strategic way, we've also done some really cool work where we're looking at that relationship I mentioned between like sentiment and the actual EVP deltas. So we did a thing where we were looking to take Novo Nordisk as a great example, right? In the healthcare pharma space. So they have very high sentiment analysis scores in like workplace and growth opportunities, right? So what's interesting is if you compare their workplace and growth opportunity categories to all of their competitors, what immediately jumps out at you is they score in some places their competitors don't. So like in work-life balance, for example, or in workplace, they have work-life balance as a major priority, but also safety culture. And none of their competitors have safety culture as a thing they're hitting on from an EVP standpoint. And similarly, when you look at like their growth areas, everybody talks about development opportunity, personal and professional growth. They talk about organizational resilience. And so what's really interesting is you can almost get this sense that they've thought very, very deeply about their culture, their values, who they are, and they very thoughtfully included that stuff in their EVPs in a way that makes them stand out and have it's almost something different to say than the normal pablum, to your point, where it's just, yeah, we care about your organization, your growth as a person and your professional development. But when someone says organizational resilience, it's, whoa, that's like out of the norm. That must be something that they hold deeply. And it suddenly sets them apart from their peers, right? That ability to see some of those connections, I think, is really interesting and opens up a level of insight or investigation almost of like how else to talk about yourself, how else to think about who you are relative to peer groups. It creates another level of, I think, discussion about EVP that maybe isn't normally talked about.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, again, my mind goes to the tactical level, like how do I compete here? And I'd heard one of my favorite recruiting leaders told me a couple of years ago, and he was like, hey, our secret weapon when it came to counters was when you're talking to someone and they're like, oh yeah, I got this other offer on the table. What would make you not take that offer? But you're relying on them to tell you things in the moment. And
interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying, wait a second, let me look at what people are saying about them. And we'll use that as this to say, oh, that's so important to you to grow. I got to tell you, as your friend here in this whole thing.
Yes.
So that changed the dynamic a little bit there for sure. So I'm thinking about that level, but I also appreciate the higher level. Are we aligned with where we want to go? We see in our acquisition studies over the last 2 years, a big focus for employers on their brand and how they're representing themselves in the market and like connecting all those pieces together. And if we're doing 10 different things, then we sound like 10 different companies potentially. And we all want to have one direction, one goal, one growth. And if we're gonna hit that, we have to do that with some semblance of alignment. And you used the term earlier, misaligned. I think it's just a great word to visualize, like we're not connected here. And in the moment, that may not cost you something today, but long term, it creates difficulties with trying to get candidates to see you for who you are as an organization and get them to accept and to compete in the market, all those kinds of things. So I'm thinking through all those levels there and intrigued by that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the difference between like small M marketing where you're positioning for the moment and the big M marketing where you're actually building a brand. And where that's so important from a brand perspective, to your point, is like having that consistency of brand where people know what they're getting and know what they're experiencing. But that means, and I say this with my chief marketing hat on, chief marketing officer hat, you got to have that consistency across all your channels. The moment you have inconsistency, then you're sending out different messages. People can see you differently, that type of thing. I think that's spot on.
So you mentioned Novo Nordisk as an example of someone that's doing some creative things using this strategically. Any other examples, whether you can name the company or not, of things that y'all saw, you're like, oh, we had this idea when we started and you're using it in this creative way that's solving some other problems you're having. Anything else to share there?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing we're seeing now is I think those organizations that are most mature are using our EVP module in concert with the other modules. I just take you through a little workflow to illustrate what I mean. As I'm sure, no doubt, like AI and machine learning skills are somewhat in demand now as compared to where they used to be, maybe just a little. So everybody and their brother's trying to hire as many of these people as they can or find these skills. So increasingly, the flow looks like this with our customers. They say, what are our competitors doing when it comes to AI and machine learning? Where are they hiring these skills? In what roles are they hiring those skills? And they look at our competitive analysis module for that. Then the next thing they might say is, how are these skills evolving? What are the newer skills that are being asked for, or the newer softwares that people are using in the world of AI and machine learning? How is this stuff evolving? That's our skills analysis module. Then they might say, okay, based on all of that analysis, I operate in the following locations around the world. Where's my best place to think about sourcing for these skills and these roles based on the relationship between supply and demand and cost? And therefore, I'm going to situate my hiring efforts in one of these several locations, right? But then what happens? Then you got to say, well, who else is operating in that location competitively, right? And what's our value prop going to be for those kind of people against those competitors? And then how am I going to successfully win against either entrenched people or other people who are entering that market? And so what we're starting to see is people think about all this stuff in concert and almost think about EVP less in the hiring thing and more about the competitive side of how do I outcompete my competitor for a scarce talent pool or for niche jobs that are otherwise very difficult to fill. Like, what's my attack strategy going to be? And what's the competitive stance going to be entering a new market or doubling down in a market in which we're already operating? And they bring all the pieces together, Ben, to like start to address that question. That's what we're seeing as the next evolution of some of this, is like fitting it all into one comprehensive strategy, right?
Yes, this becomes one more step in what the most forward-thinking, most innovative companies are doing to compete for the talent that's the lifeblood of their organization.
Yeah, exactly.
I mentioned that conversation I had earlier with the chief people officer today, and she was talking about how she said everybody thinks about EVP just in hiring, but she said, we're looking at it through the lens of how do we use this as a tool to retain people and things too. So there's lots of value to this, not just if you're a company out there that's already got a very well ironed out TA process, and many people say, hey, there's always room to optimize. But if you've got that really well ironed out, some of this EVP insight could also be used for what our people think about us that they're telling the world about us if it's out there on some of the public reviews. And is that what we want to be? And is it aligned with what we see ourselves doing? Or are they seeing some values that we're not even talking about when it comes to trying to attract talent because they see this piece, but it's not on our radar? So I love getting all those different components together.
Fascinating area. There's a million questions to ask, right?
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
I think the fun thing for me is like seeing what clients are doing out there, right? Like we had a really interesting conversation with someone who wants to start to use the EVP data for A/B testing. So since we know the EVP footprint basically of every post, could they intentionally put out different posts with different EVPs? And then using all the metrics you can now do in your CRMs and ATSs, what's my number of applicants? What's my quality of applicant? What's my hire velocity? What's my overall conversion rate? If I know that I'm using a different EVP in two markets that are fundamentally similar, that have similar expectations, but I use EVP 1 here and EVP 2 here, can I see a material difference in my throughput rate or my conversion rate and actually start to do some true analysis of your EVP and its impact on your flow through and conversion data? Honestly, let me be direct with you, Ben. I hadn't thought of that when we launched it, but I'm like, oh man, that is cool. So now we're looking at ways like, can we better support that through the tech? Because I thought that was an amazing idea. So anyway, that's the fun thing about this is now that data is out in the world, like to your point, like people are going to start getting creative and connecting the dots even in ways we didn't anticipate and try to do even new things with it, which is cool.
I love it. So if someone is listening out there right now, they're curious to see more of this or learn more about it, or even see, as you are sharing more about some of these other use cases that are coming out, what's the best way for them to connect or learn more about Talent Neuron?
Yeah, the easiest thing is probably just to hit the website. Easy to get to. It's talentneuron.com. We have examples up there. We link out to a bunch of information on the EVP itself. You can schedule time for a demo that way and get more information. Recent PR that we did on it is up there as well. So you can learn more self-service and just get more flavor yourself. But if you have enough interest, we can reach out and do a demo and actually show people what it looks like.
Tremendous. Awesome. I appreciate the time, Dave. This is always, as I said at the beginning, I love the data. I love using it for something practical and helpful. And every employer that I know is trying to figure out how do we compete? How do we stand out? And this is a super creative way for them to do that. And using the data that are already out there right now, just tapping back into that. So thank you for coming to share with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. We're pretty excited. It's a pretty neat advance in a different direction. So yeah, we're thrilled too. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. We'll stay tuned to what continues to evolve over there at Talent Neuron as y'all are breaking some new ground. We appreciate you and the work you and the team are doing. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff next time on We Are Only Human.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.